The story is complete. Without me, Liu Ryan, the scum world remains an endless night. Ryan reminds you to connect to Wi-Fi, prepare your chips, and toss some free flowers. For the journey begins with a completed tale. As spring blossoms and flowers bloom, my daughter jumped from the 5th floor. My wife, a psychiatrist, was on the phone when my daughter stood on the rooftop, speaking in a mocking tone about depression and suicide. You're just pretending. I think you're just being melodramatic. If you really wanted to die, you would have done it already. As my daughter lay dying, she wanted to see her mother one last time. I found my wife at the hospital, only to be met with her refusal. A healer's heart should be compassionate. But Hu Xiaochuan and Yao Yao, who witnessed the jump, struggled with nausea at the sight of the blood. I needed to provide them with psychological care. Yet my wife insisted on petty disputes at this moment. My daughter passed away, unable to find peace. My wife believed that both the diagnosis letter for depression and the death certificate were just excuses concocted by my daughter and me to lure her back home. It wasn't until she saw the grave, with clusters of cherry blossoms blooming lively, that the truth struck her. On the hospital rooftop, my daughter Yoyu sat quietly by the edge, tilting her head as if admiring the blossoms. "Yo-yo," I called out. "Come back. Return to daddy's side, okay?" Tears streamed down my face as I pleaded with her. Yo-yo turned her head and looked at me, her face still wearing a radiant smile. "Daddy, why are you crying?" "To others." At this moment, Yo-yo seemed like any other innocent child. There was no difference between her and an ordinary innocent little girl, but only I knew, at just 7 years old, she was already suffering from severe depression. Yo-yo dangled her legs. One shoe had already fallen off. I wanted to rush forward, but the rescuers held me back. At this moment, Yo-yo couldn't handle even the slightest agitation. "Is it because mommy isn't coming home again?" Her tone was calm, but as her father, I knew. Beneath that calm exterior lay countless tears and disappointment. 2 years ago, when my wife, Liu Ryan's first love, Hu Xiaochuan, returned to the country with his daughter, she became incredibly busy. In the past 2 years, the times she came home could be counted on one hand. "Daddy, I want to call mommy." Yo-yo's ethereal tone suddenly became firm. "The child has already said it. Hurry up and make the call." The rescuers urged me after hearing her rare request. I fumbled to take out my phone, so nervous that I dropped it several times. I couldn't be sure if she would even pick up. After all, whenever my wife was with Hu Xiaochuan and his daughter, she never answered my calls. Sure enough, the first attempt went unanswered. "Please pick up," I prayed silently. On the 15th attempt, the call finally connected. An impatient voice came through on the other end. I wasted no time, explaining the situation as quickly as I could. I pleaded with her to calm our daughter down. After a brief pause, she told me to hand the phone to you. I breathed a sigh of relief. Although Yo-ayu was diagnosed with depression, her wife is a psychologist and should know how to calm their daughter's emotions at such a moment. The rescue personnel and I exchanged glances, planning to grab Yo-ayu back the moment she took the phone. However, Yo-ayu only allowed me to place the phone on the other side of the rooftop and then step back. She stood up, running lightly toward the phone, as if it was her last glimmer of hope. Everyone's hearts were in their throats, holding their breath. Yo-ayu picked up the phone. Her wife's voice from the phone was so loud that we could all hear it clearly. "Yo-ayu, what kind of nonsense are you up to again? Depression, suicide? A few days ago, you were still smiling and cheerful. You're faking it, aren't you? I think you're just being dramatic. If you wanted to commit suicide, you would have done it already." A gust of wind blew past, whirling countless cherry blossom petals into a chaotic dance, accompanied by the gasps of the crowd. Yo-ayu, like the cherry petals, fell from the rooftop. I felt a buzzing sound in my head, my mind going completely blank. Instinctively, I rushed downstairs, step by step toward the scene. I closed my eyes, telling myself, this must be a dream. It must be a dream. But the screams of the people around me and the smell of blood were all so vivid. I ran toward my daughter lying in a pool of blood, muttering incoherently for someone nearby to call a doctor for help. I had often seen on TV how frantic family members would kneel and beg doctors to save their loved ones. I always thought scriptwriters exaggerated, but when it was my turn, only then could I truly feel that despair. Seeing Ayu's small body lying in the pool of blood, forget kneeling. Even if I had to prostrate myself before every deity on earth, I would do so with utmost devotion. My daughter was rushed to the emergency room immediately, recalling the things Liu Ryan said earlier. I felt my blood boil with rage. I dialed her number again. This time, it was picked up quickly. Boda! Are you crazy? Why are you calling so much? Don't you know Meow Meow is a light sleeper? Meow Meow was my wife's most cared-for patient. Before, I couldn't understand. She only had potential signs of psychological issues, not even an actual illness. Why was my wife so invested? Later, I learned the truth. Meow was the daughter of my wife's first love, Hu Xiaochuan. Not only did she provide psychological counseling for her, she even visited her home to care for her daily needs. Whenever I questioned her about it, she would always rebut confidently, I am a psychologist. Meow has no mother, and she just moved to a new environment. She needs guidance. Don't use your narrow-minded doubts to insult my professional ethics. She cared deeply for Meow, but for her own daughter, she had not an ounce of patience. She would always yell at her. Every time I advised her to speak kindly, she would retort, are you the doctor or am I? Your daughter is so thick-skinned, insomnia or whatever. It's all just to get my attention. Meow, on the other hand, is mentally fragile and needs more care. I think she's just jealous of me. She's definitely inherited your knack for pettiness. All she does is sulk uselessly. I was trembling all over. I couldn't believe that even now, she was still obsessively talking about Meow. I roared, Liu Ryan, what exactly did you just say to Ayu on the phone? But to my shock, her voice was even louder than mine. Boda! Stop shouting at me. I told the truth. What's got you so worked up? You to just keep up with your antics. Depression? Do you really think faking a medical record will fool me into coming back? Father and daughter both playing sympathy games. With that, she hung up. I clenched my fists, feeling the fury ignite in my veins. It was one thing for her to treat me this way, but how could she treat Ayu like this? I always thought Liu Ryan, as a psychologist, would understand our daughter's emotions. Looking back now, I couldn't have been more wrong. She could be gentle and patient with all her patients, but with Ayu, she didn't have an ounce of compassion. Ayu's depression, at its core, stemmed from the lack of motherly love. The doors to the emergency room opened. I pushed aside all those emotions, jogging forward to meet the doctor. The child is still alive, but her condition is critical. You'd better let everyone who needs to see her come now, the doctor said, removing his mask, his expression grim. In an instant, my vision blurred with tears. My world collapsed, seeing Ayu covered in tubes, eyes tightly shut, being pushed out of the emergency room. My heart felt like it was being torn apart. After settling her back in her room, I leaned against the door, slid down to the ground, and let the pain pour out as tears, drop after drop, hit the cold floor. As if an invisible hand was gripping my heart tightly, pulling it from my chest. The pain was suffocating. After 10 minutes or so, I mustered all my strength to stand up, picked up my phone, and began notifying family members one by one. Not long after, my parents and elder brother arrived at the hospital. Seeing Ayu's pale little face, everyone couldn't hold back their tears of heartbreak. What's going on? Why isn't Ryan here at a time like this? My father couldn't help but ask. I silently dialed her number. only to find that she had already blocked me. My brother frowned and handed me his phone. I dialed again. As expected, Liu Ryan answered quickly. "You need to come to the hospital right now. It's about Yo Ayu," but she rudely cut me off. A healer must be compassionate. Hu Xiaochuan and Yao Yao saw the bloodstains left by someone jumping off the building, and they couldn't stop vomiting. I need to provide them with psychological support at the hospital. Why are you picking a fight at a time like this? I wanted to say something more, but the sound of a busy signal already told me she had hung up. She wasn't coming. My parents asked me together. I closed my eyes and nodded. Even with Yo Ayu in such a state, she still refused to show up. This kind of woman, does she even deserve to be called human? Just then, my daughter opened her eyes. The whole family turned away to wipe their tears first, before gathering around her. My daughter's lips were dry and cracked, but she still managed to force a smile. She lifted her frail hand and placed it on my face. With a hoarse voice, she said, "Dad, don't cry." It felt like a blunt, sharp knife stabbing deep into my heart. The pain was so intense that I could barely breathe. "Dad's not crying. Dad will always stay with you, Yo Ayu. Dad, I want to talk to Mom. I want to tell her I'm really sick. I didn't lie to her. Can she believe me just this once? Alright, Dad will go and get Mom for you." I hugged Yo Ayu, left her with my parents and elder brother, and walked out of the hospital room. This was Yo Ayu's last wish. I had to fulfill it. Her workplace was right next to the hospital where Yo Ayu was admitted. Even if I had to drag her there by force, I would. I rushed to the floor where Liu Ryan was. Soon, I saw her through a glass window. She was tucking me out into bed, gently patting her over and over. My eyes stung with emotion. I recognized that gesture so well. She used to lull Yo Ayu to sleep in the same way when she was a baby. But the last time I saw her do that was 4 years ago. Meow peacefully fell asleep in the warmth of her blanket. Liu Ryan slowly stood up, smiled, and turned to Hu Xiaochuan, who had been standing beside her. She pulled him into an embrace, saying something softly to him. I felt my blood boil, and I kicked the door open. Both of them were startled, their faces pale when they saw my bloodshot eyes. "Bo-da, you don't misunderstand. There's nothing between me and Ryan." Hu Xiaochuan quickly pushed Liu Ryan away, trying to distance himself. Liu Ryan, seeing my furious demeanor, worried I might hurt Hu Xiaochuan, shielded him behind her. With a face full of disdain, she said, "Why are you chasing me to the hospital? I already told you. I'm working. Can't you prioritize for once?" Thinking of Yo Ayu lying in the hospital bed at that very moment, I suppressed my rage and didn't argue with them. Instead, I went straight to Liu Ryan and grabbed her hand. "Liu Ryan, you're coming with me to see Yo Ayu now." But Liu Ryan yanked her hand away forcefully. "Bo-da, are you crazy? Can't you see I'm providing psychological support to Xiaochuan and Meow? You're getting more and more ridiculous, thinking you can use this kind of stunt to trick me into going back. Yo Ayu is dying. Come with me right now," I roared hoarsely, but Liu Ryan burst into laughter. "Bo-da, you're just like your daughter. Terrible actors. One moment claiming you're going to commit suicide, the next saying someone's dying. You're both just a pair of liars." Smack! Unable to hold back anymore, I raised my hand and slapped her. It was the first time I had ever hit anyone. Liu Ryan stood there, stunned. I hoisted her up and started to leave. Hu Xiaochuan rushed forward to stop me, but I kicked him aside. "Bo-da, if you have a problem, take it out on me. I won't let you hurt Xiaochuan," Liu Ryan screamed, kicking and clawing at me like a mad woman. I had no choice but to put her down. At that moment, my elder brother called, "Bo-da, come back quickly. It's Yo Ayu." Taking advantage of my distraction, Liu Ryan shoved me out of the room and slammed the door shut with a loud bang. When I finally returned to the hospital room, Yo Ayu's eyes were wide open, filled with tears. Dad, why won't Mom ever see me? She must be with Meow, right? Does Mom not love me at all? Looking at my 7-year-old daughter, burdened with sorrow far beyond her years, I felt as though my heart was being torn apart. Beep! The alarm went off. Doctors and nurses rushed in. I screamed her name, but there was no response. Moments later, someone dragged me out of the room. Through the glass window, I could only watch as Yoayu's small body endured shock after shock from the defibrillator. Finally, the monitor displayed a flat line. When we rushed back into the room, all we heard was the doctor's voice. Time of death, March 13th, 2024. 15 hours, 17 minutes to seconds. I watched as the doctor prepared to cover Yoayu's face with a white cloth. I rushed forward, desperately stopping him. No, you're lying. My daughter isn't dead. Yoayu hasn't died. It seemed like someone was holding me back, restraining me, hugging me tightly. But I couldn't feel anything anymore. When I woke up, it was already the next day. Even though the pain was suffocating, I forced myself to get up. I had to prepare for Yoayu's funeral. After all, my parents were elderly, and losing their granddaughter had made them even more frail. My elder brother also had to return to manage the company. However, I still asked my father to leave his most capable assistant, Yan Yan, with me. Yan Yan was younger than me and strikingly beautiful, yet more than her appearance. She was renowned in the industry for her sharp and decisive methods. I specifically requested her because I needed her help to handle my divorce. Perhaps this marriage should have ended long ago, but I had endured it until now because I wanted to give Yoayu a complete family. Logically speaking, someone like Liu Ryan, an ordinary person, should never have been part of my family. It all started when a partner from one of my branch companies needed to negotiate an important project, but was worried about his daughter who had depression. I volunteered to take his daughter to see a psychologist. That psychologist was Liu Ryan. After a few sessions, I noticed her extraordinary patience with children. She was exceptionally skilled at soothing children's emotions. Soon enough, I fell in love with her. I proposed to her, and we held a grand wedding. I believed that having a psychologist as a wife would make our family warm, happy, and joyful. At first, it truly was. So we had Yoayu, but everything changed with the reappearance of her first love, Hu Xiaochuan. She shifted all her love for me and Yoayu onto that father and daughter pair. She became indifferent to me and completely impatient with Yoayu. When I confronted her about it, she would only defend herself confidently, using her professional ethics as a psychologist as an excuse. She even turned it back on me, accusing me of being petty and narrow-minded. Even when Yoayu was diagnosed with depression, she showed no concern at all. Even now, after things have come to this, in the past, for Yoayu's sake, I endured her behavior. But now, she's the reason Yoayu is gone. I will not tolerate her anymore. Yoayu's funeral was held the following day. I didn't call Liu Ryan again. Friends and family already knew how Liu Ryan treated other men and their children better than her own, so no one mentioned her in front of me. But behind my back, they all cursed her bitterly. I forced myself to get through Yoayu's final farewell. I could feel that Yoayu, like me, had long stopped expecting anything from Liu Ryan as a mother. She had been absent from what little childhood Yoayu had left. She had no right to appear at the funeral as a mother. It wasn't until Yoayu's burial was complete that I asked Yan Yan send Liu Ryan Yoayu's death certificate along with divorce papers. Then, I blocked all of Liu Ryan's contact methods. Less than half a day later, Liu Ryan was waiting for me at my doorstep. Bo-da! Don't take this joke too far, faking. Yoayu's medical records was one thing, but forging a death certificate Yo Io is still so young. How could you not think about the taboo? I didn't want to waste words on someone blind in both heart and mind. I brushed past her, intending to go inside. Angrily, she grabbed the door handle and blocked my way, half scolding, half pleading. You've gone far enough. Haven't I already come back? Stop joking about things like this. You're being ridiculous. Even changing the door code? Also, I suggest you stop using divorce as a threat. It's harmful to our relationship. I laughed mockingly for a moment. Ha! She still thought I was playing some childish game with her. I shoved her aside. She clutched her arm with a pitiful expression, saying, Boda. You're hurting me. In the past, I would have been heartbroken by her delicate complaints. Now, looking at her, all I felt was disgust, as though staring at a venomous snake. The only response I gave her was the sound of the door slamming shut. A glimmer of joy flashed in her eyes. She thought my avoiding her was a sign of hesitation, afraid I might lose control and forgive her immediately. She kept knocking persistently, begging me to let her in. Inside, leaning against the closed door, I trembled all over. I had to admit, she knew me well. I was avoiding her because I was afraid I might lose control and strangle her to death right there at the door. But I had promised Yoayo to live well. After taking a deep breath to calm myself, I sent a message to Yan Yan. Soon, Liu Ryan's knocking stopped. What followed was her furious shouting, You're lying, Yoayo can't be dead. You're colluding with that father and daughter to deceive me. Ms. Liu, Yan Yan's calm voice responded. We have fulfilled our obligation to inform you. Whether you choose to believe it or not, you have the means to verify the truth for yourself. As for the divorce agreement, if you refuse to sign it, Bo Da will pursue a divorce through legal channels. After hearing this, Liu Ryan was momentarily silent. Then she pulled out her phone. Perhaps she opened the family group chat she hadn't looked at in almost a year. Perhaps she scrolled through the social media posts of my parents and other relatives. She began to sob uncontrollably. I'm sorry. I didn't know I really. Outside the door, Liu Ryan cried and apologized repeatedly. But inside, I held the teddy bear Io had loved most and lay down on her small bed, giving no response to Liu Ryan. Crocodile tears. If sorry could fix everything, there wouldn't be so much heartbreak in this world. Not long after, the sobbing outside suddenly stopped. Ryan, meow meow, feeling well. She seems to have a fever. Liu Ryan had received a call from Hu Xiaochuan. Xiaochuan, don't worry. I'll come right away. Liu Ryan wiped her tears and hurriedly left. See? No matter the time or situation, her heart always belongs to her first love. But now, I no longer feel hurt or sad because of it. I believe Yoayu wouldn't either. I asked Yan Yan to fire Hu Xiaochuan. With his abilities, he was never qualified to work at the company. Initially, it was Yan Yan who told me that a friend of hers, a single father, had just moved to Jiangsheng with no relatives nearby. Raising his child alone was tough. She asked me to give him a position out of consideration for Yoayu. I agreed. But later, I found out this friend was her first love. Since the position was a favor from me, I had every right to take it back. I also petitioned the court to reclaim all marital assets accumulated during my marriage to Liu Ryan. How could Liu Ryan's meager salary possibly sustain the lavish lifestyle of the Hu family? Living in a luxury apartment, she had been using the money from my black card. By the morning, I had fired Hu Xiaochuan. By the afternoon, Liu Ryan was waiting for me at the residential entrance. Bo Da, I know you're upset because I didn't attend Yoayu's funeral, but you shouldn't take it out on Xiaochuan. He's innocent. Why would you fire him without discerning right from wrong? My company. I'll fire whoever I want. I threw out the words and prepared to leave. Bo Da, can't you be a little considerate toward Xiaochuan? You're a father too. How can you be so heartless? Liu Ryan pleaded, grabbing my sleeve. I shook her off and interrupted her. You go be considerate. I'm supposed to consider Hu Xiaochuan, but who's going to consider me and Yoayu? Ryan wanted to say more, but her phone rang. After reading a few messages, her face turned pale with panic. She shouted at me, Boda, you've gone too far. Not only did you fire him, but you also took back the apartment. Are you trying to make Xiaochuan and his daughter homeless? How can you be so cruel? Now Xiaochuan is threatening to jump off the building. Is this what you want, to drive him to death? Jump off the building? I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Seeing my reaction, Liu Ryan quickly pointed to the rooftop of our building. Sure enough, there was Hu Xiaochuan standing on the edge, looking unsteady. Liu Ryan grabbed me and pulled me toward the stairs. On the way up, she anxiously begged, Boda, Xiaochuan says he'll only talk to you. Please, just promise him you won't take back the apartment. Okay. Hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh. Where did they find the nerve? When we reached the rooftop, we saw Hu Xiaochuan arguing with the rescue personnel. Stay back if you come. Closer, I'll jump. When he saw me approach, Hu Xiaochuan grew even more agitated. Boda, you're trying to drive me to my death, aren't you? Well, you've succeeded. Liu Ryan turned pale with fear, pleading desperately, Boda, I'm begging you. Just calm him down first. You don't want this to become a public scandal, do you? I paced slowly toward Hu Xiaochuan, with Liu Ryan clinging closely behind me, probably worried I'd push him off. Looking at Hu Xiaochuan, I smirked, my expression playful. Boda, Xiaochuan has depressive tendencies. You mustn't provoke him. Liu Ryan warned from behind me. I scoffed coldly and spoke deliberately to Hu Xiaochuan. Depression? Suicide? You're faking it, aren't you? I think you're just being dramatic. If you really wanted to kill yourself, you have done it already. As soon as I said that, Hu Xiaochuan's face twisted in anger. But Liu Ryan froze, as though she suddenly remembered something. She turned slowly, staring at me in horror. Those were the exact words she had said to Yo Ayu that day on the rooftop. He won't jump, I declared confidently. I've seen this before. If he really had depression, he'd have jumped already. After hearing that, I addressed the crowd. Then, I turned to Liu Ryan and added, just like Yo Ayu did. Liu Ryan stood frozen, like a dead tree rooted to the ground. Her face turned ashen, and her lips began to tremble uncontrollably. After a long pause, she spoke in a hoarse voice. You mean Yo Ayu jumped because of what I said? She had jumped from the building. Seeing my expression, Liu Ryan immediately knew her guess was correct. She collapsed onto the ground, covering her face with her hands. Tears poured through her fingers. Yo Ayu, Mommy is sorry. It was me. Mommy forced you to your death. Liu Ryan wailed hysterically, nearly fainting from crying. I couldn't be bothered to listen any longer. I turned and walked away. Her tears, which once left me helpless, no longer stirred a single ripple in my heart. The cherry blossoms were still in full bloom, but Yo Ayu was long gone. The main character had left the stage, leaving only Hu Xiaochuan standing awkwardly in place. How could I not know? This farce was orchestrated by Liu Ryan from the beginning. Otherwise, how could Hu Xiaochuan enter the highly secured neighborhood? But my heart was already dead. How could I possibly fall into their trap again? I felt neither joy at Liu Ryan's suffering, nor any desire to deviate from my plan. This wasn't revenge. I was merely returning everything to its rightful state. Soon, I withdrew the project funds that were originally intended for the private hospital where Liu Ryan worked. Yan Yan later reported the outcome to me. The hospital asked Liu Ryan to pack her things and leave the very next day. Liu Ryan was dissatisfied, so she brought her termination letter to argue. The newly appointed psychologist stood nearby, watching silently. After arguing for a long time, She finally realized that her reputation and standing at the hospital, all of her so-called reputation and achievements, were built upon my investments. The once proud Liu Ryan could not accept this reality. She broke down, causing a scene, recounting how dedicated she was, how professional and competent she had always been, refusing to accept her dismissal. Her outburst drew in staff from other departments, curious to see the commotion. Professional and competent? Dedicated? Ms. Liu, making such claims insults us psychologists. A nearby psychologist couldn't help but sneer. He didn't even address her as Dr. Liu. Already furious, Liu Ryan found someone to lash out at. She retorted, "I've worked at this hospital for 5 years. You may have higher qualifications, but in terms of experience, you're in no position to lecture me." "Oh, I absolutely am," the psychologist replied with a smile. "Ms. Liu, you claim you're dedicated? In your 5 years at this hospital, how many patients have you truly served? Most of the time, the only regular visitors to your office were a man named Hu Xiaochuan and his daughter, Miao Miao. From their records and data, neither of them suffers from any psychological disorders. They don't even require psychological intervention. So tell us, Ms. Liu, were you truly dedicated? Or were you using the hospital as a venue for an affair? You know the answer to that better than anyone." Hearing this, Liu Ryan's face turned ashen. Her mouth twitched, but she couldn't find a single word to argue back. More and more people gathered outside the office, watching the spectacle unfold. Everyone began pointing fingers at Liu Ryan, mocking her claims of professional competence. As a psychologist, you failed to recognize your own daughter's severe depression. Instead, you used vicious words that pushed your daughter to jump off a building. You lack even the basic psychological knowledge that an ordinary person should have. Yet you dare call yourself a professional? The doctor's words were sharp and unrelenting. Liu Ryan, seeing the crowd around her, began to curse her morals, calling her heartless and depraved beyond redemption, became enraged with shame. "You're lying, my daughter wasn't depressed. You're making this all up," she shouted. "How convenient." The doctor responded coolly, "I happen to be your daughter's psychologist." He handed Liu Ryan a medical record. With trembling hands, she took it and saw the glaring name Yoiu on it. She flipped through the pages, as if reliving her daughter's escalating illness, worsening each time. Finally, she stopped at the entry for the day her daughter jumped. "I didn't let Yin Yan's anymore. For me and for Yoiu, Liu Ryan's tears weren't worth a thing." Afterward, my inbox was flooded with lengthy letters of repentance from Liu Ryan. I told Yin Yan to drag them all into the trash bin and delete them permanently. I no longer wanted to deal with any of it. If Liu Ryan didn't want a divorce, then I would wait for the court's ruling. Until then, I needed to sort out my assets. First was the large flat where we lived most of the time. The place that held Yoiu's childhood memories. Yin Yan, that the sight might upset me, offered to accompany me. But as soon as we reached the door, I discovered that the entry code had been changed. Seeing this, Yin Yan arranged for security to intervene. They broke the door open, as expected. Inside were Hu Xiaochuan and his daughter, Miao Miao, their luggage and preparing to move in. Hearing the commotion outside, the two seemed frightened. What enraged me most was seeing them packing away Yoiu's belongings. The sight made my blood boil, and I rushed forward, ready to strangle Hu Xiaochuan. Yin Yan's just in time to hold me back. The bodyguards, understanding the situation, immediately began to beat Hu Xiaochuan. By the time his face was bruised and swollen, Liu Ryan arrived, shielding Hu Xiaochuan behind her. "Boda, I'm the one who told them to stay here. You can't hurt them. Xiaochuan's apartment was taken back by you, and they had nowhere else to go. I had no choice. But what you're doing beating people like this is unreasonable," and slap before she could finish her sentence. Yan Yan slapped her across the face. Why waste reason on someone whose moral compass is skewed? Yan Yan remarked coolly. Then she slapped Liu Ryan on the other cheek. You have 5 minutes to put everything back the way it was, and then take your first love and leave. Yan Yan added. I don't want to waste another word on her. Seeing that I was serious, Liu Ryan panicked, afraid Yan Yan might involve lawyers and press charges for trespassing or theft to put Hu Xiaochuan behind bars. She hurriedly helped restore all of Yu Ayu's belongings to their original place and packed up Hu Xiaochuan and Miao Mao's things. But then, she entered Yu Ayu's room and stayed there for a long time. I stepped inside, intending to kick her out, only to see her sitting by Yu Ayu's bed, her eyes vacant, her hunched body trembling slightly. Her dry, pale lips quivered faintly, and on the bed lay a beautifully crafted box. I recognized it instantly. Yo Ayo had called it her secret treasure box, and even I had never opened it. It was only now that I learned what was inside. A diary and some toys. Unable to help myself, I opened the diary. March 27th, today is parent-teacher meeting day. I know Dad will come. Mom is going to Miao Mao's class next door. I really wish Mom could see me get my award, though. April 2nd. Big Zhuang said I'm a wild child with no mom. Everyone laughed. Why is it that only your dad ever comes to parent-child events? I couldn't explain to them. It's because Mom is going with Uncle Hu to Miao Mao's parent-child events instead. May 18th. Today, Miao Miao brought Big Zhuang and a few of his friends to corner me. They said I'm shameless, pulling at my hair. Boda, I learned that when several strands of hair are yanked out at once, it can even take some skin with it. Miao Miao said, go ahead, tell your mom. She won't believe you anyway. Boda. June 1, Mom said my crying face looks ugly. Is that why she doesn't come home? If so, I can try to pretend and act like a normal person. I can manage my relationships well. I can smile at others, as long as Mom can love me. Boda. June 10th, the doctor lady said, I could try to look for the light, to search for the love the world gives me. So, does that mean Mom actually loves me? Is it just because I'm sick that I can't feel it? Boda, yes. Starting today, I'll collect all the love Mom gives me. I couldn't bear to read any further. I turned to the box beside me, filled with items that looked old and slightly unfamiliar. Suddenly, Liu Ryan crawled over, her face tear-streaked, sobbing as she picked up each item from the box. This, she choked, is a comb Miao Miao didn't want. I casually brought it home, but Yo Ayo treated it as a gift from me. And this are socks I bought for Miao Miao in the wrong size. I threw them into the shoe cabinet, but Yo Ayo thought I bought them for her. This toy, she sobbed harder. It's missing to pieces. Embarrassed to give it to Miao Miao, I brought it home instead. My Yo Ayo, she once tried so hard to keep living. It was me. It was I, her mother, who personally killed her. Liu Ryan frantically pounded her own head, crying out in anguish. I am not even human, my Yo Ayo. I have wronged you, I've wronged you. I coldly watched as she collapsed to the ground, weeping with gut-wrenching despair. I recalled the words of Yo Ayo's psychologist. The recovery of someone with depression is not only reliant on treatment, but also on the warmth of the surrounding world. At this moment, I long for Yo Ayo more than ever. In that other world, are there cherry blossoms my daughter loves so much? I didn't know how long Liu Ryan had been crying, nor when Hu Xiaochuan entered, his face full of grievance as he said, Ryan, they were so rough with me. My whole body hurts. Miao Miao followed him in, immediately throwing herself into her arms, crying at Liu, I like it here. Can't I stay here, please? I don't like that rental house. It doesn't even have a prince's bed. But Liu Ryan ignored her completely. As if suddenly remembering something, she turned sharply to Hu Xiaochuan and asked, "So, when you and Meow Meow said you saw bloodstains from someone jumping off a building and felt nauseous and needed me to comfort you, was it my daughter Youayu who jumped? Wasn't it?" I didn't know. Hu Xiaochuan evaded her gaze, his expression shifty. Liu Ryan abruptly stood up, grabbed Hu Xiaochuan by the collar, and shouted hysterically, "So, you did it on purpose, didn't you? You knew perfectly well that Youayu had fallen to her death, but you deliberately distracted me, so Youayu couldn't see me one last time, leaving her to die with unresolved regrets. Hu Xiaochuan, I never would have thought you were this kind of person." Seeing that he could no longer benefit from Liu Ryan, Hu Xiaochuan dropped all pretense and bluntly retorted, "Does it matter? Your husband came looking for you in person, but you didn't believe him. How can you blame us for that? You didn't want to take care of your own family, always running off instead. We were just your excuse to avoid responsibility. A fickle woman like you. Even I, Hu Xiaochuan, have no respect for you if it weren't for the fact that your husband was willing to pay you money." Slap! Liu Ryan, infuriated, slapped Hu Xiaochuan hard across the face. Hu Xiaochuan retaliated with a backhand slap of his own and sneered, "You think I'm like your husband, letting you get away with everything?" Liu Ryan, clutching her swollen cheek in disbelief, shouted, "Hu Xiaochuan, do you even have a heart?" Seeing that Liu Ryan had completely turned against him, and knowing he had nothing more to gain, Hu Xiaochuan grabbed Meow Meow and stormed out. As he left, he couldn't resist sneering, "Liu Ryan, women like you are pathetic. You ruined a perfectly good family, serves you right." Meow Meow snorted and stuck her tongue out at Liu Ryan in mockery. Liu Ryan stood there, dumbfounded, staring at the departing father and daughter, unable to regain her composure for a long time. It took her a long time to regain her senses, until Yin Yin finally escorted her out of my house. After that, Liu Ryan repeatedly appeared at the gates of the neighborhood, in the underground parking lot, or at my company entrance to block my way, kneeling and apologizing to me, weeping as she expressed her deep regret. She wanted to make amends for me, for Youayu. She even wished to set aside the past and start over with me. I laughed. The life of Youayu, the suffering Youayu endured. Who could ever compensate for that? My answer to her was always the divorce agreement. On the path to Youayu's grave, she choked with sobs, but no one responded to her cries. The incident of Hu Xiaochuan faking a suicide jump was exposed online, and his affair with Liu Ryan was dug up as well. No one was willing to rent a place to him anymore. He had no choice but to target wealthy older women. But his scattershot approach quickly led to a scheduling clash, and he was beaten until he became disabled. Meow Meow eventually became the wild without a mother that she once mocked others for. Liu Ryan, clutching her daughter's treasure box every day, suffered a complete mental breakdown. The once proud psychologist ended up living in a mental institution. But all of this was no longer of any concern to me. I focused on establishing a foundation to help depression patients, hoping to use my own experience to tell more people that the greatest survival challenge for people with depression is misunderstanding and prejudice. The illness occurs within the patient themselves, but what inflicts the deepest wounds on them is still the actions of others. By my daughter's grave, I planted a cherry blossom tree. Youayu's life was as beautiful yet fleeting as the cherry blossoms. But year after year, the cherry blossoms will bloom each spring as expected. Just like Youayu will forever live in my heart.